Baltimore, and that is where we begin on NFL Live as the playoffs start. Hard to believe. Dan Orlovsky in the house, Mina Kimes and Ryan Clark fresh off of Notre Dame's big win.
Hey, what were you guys doing last night?
We were in Miami hours ago.
Taking pictures together.
I told RC, don't worry, I'm like, man, your son just basically like won the biggest game ever. Like, do not come into work today. So kudos to RC.
Yeah, wait, what about me? I took a 7 a.m.
Yeah, you
flight
gotta
out
get
of
back
Miami,
here,
man.
Hannah. You gotta get back.
Yeah, hey,
I am here for we
bro,
are devoted.
I got a pizza box stacked under a Kleenex box with a FaceTime iPad on it. So if it ever falls during the show, guys, just please excuse me. I'm just going to pick it up and go work through it.
Blame Notre Dame football.
All right, let's go to your other favorite team. All right, RC, let's go to the Pittsburgh Steelers. And Russell Wilson came to the Steelers on a one-year deal, and his play has been trending down, while Baltimore's defense has been trending up. Over the last 4 weeks of the season, Wilson ranked 30th in the NFL in total QBR and yards per attempt. Meanwhile, that Ravens defense, they ranked top 2 in both categories. Wilson also struggled to complete passes. He's taken sacks at a high rate. RC, what are your expectations in this game, which could be so pivotal to his future?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is you have to look at the way Russell Wilson has turned the ball over this year in some of the biggest games. And when he became the starting quarterback of the Pittsburgh Steelers, it really was sort of boom or nothing. One thing that sticks out to me about watching Hard Knocks was listening to the Baltimore Ravens secondary coach say, with this guy, it's either three-pointers or layups. There's no mid-range game. Yeah. And I thought about this. Okay, is it because Russell Wilson doesn't work in the mid-range, or they don't really have receivers and skill players that win in those areas? And I believe it's a little bit of both. So how do they create those plays? And the other piece of it is this. Early on in the season, you could say that Russell Wilson could exploit this Ravens defense with big plays in the passing game, but they really shored those things up over the last 6 weeks of the season. So this could be a really difficult task for the quarterback if George Pickens doesn't make some huge plays in one-on-one situations.
Yeah, Ryan, that's such a good point about the lack of that intermediate passing game. It's been kind of an issue with Russ now, going back to his time in Denver. When he has been able to access that part of the field, a lot of it has involved Pat Freiermuth, their tight end. So I think he needs to be a big part of this game, outside of the obvious shot plays outside the numbers to George Pickens. The other thing, going back and watching their Week 16 matchup, he actually moved the ball pretty well. It was the turnovers that killed them. But what struck me, and this has been the case, I think, throughout much of Russell Wilson's time in Pittsburgh, the ball has to come out fast. It's when he holds on to it that bad things, sacks, negative plays happen. But when he's throwing the ball in rhythm, he's able to hit on, in this last matchup against Baltimore, he hit on, I think, his best throws. Thinking about the post to Jefferson versus cover 2, one of his best throws of the entire season. The wheel route to Patterson, the seam ball to Ben Skoranek. All of those throws happen quickly. So I think that's going to be key for Russ in this one. Can you play in rhythm instead of trying to extend?
I'd also say this. They got a run block significantly better. It's really been an issue for this team all season long is there's mis-IDs in the run game. They're very disconnected when it comes to the run game. Number one, the tight ends. The tight end group has to play better in the run game. I want you to pay attention right side of the screen. The offensive line all moves to the right side of the screen. The tight end steps one way, then goes back the other way. They don't secure the edge of the line of scrimmage, and it's a run for no yardage. The second part, they don't move together in unison. The left guard is the only person moving on this play right now. The whole right side hasn't even moved. So there's different levels to the run game. Everyone's going, Najee Harris doesn't run the football. Where is he supposed to go? Because when you're disconnected, someone is consistently getting beat. Once again, watch the right side. You want to get a double team to capture the edge. That's pretty good landmarks, except the double team doesn't happen. And they're late. And instead of getting that edge set in a seam, there's nothing there. And then the second part, in their pass game, and it's a little bit to what RC and Mina are talking about, they're not Baltimore defensively going to let George win one-on-one. Somebody outside of George or opposite George, including Russell Wilson, one has to be ready for it, and then two has to take advantage of it. This Steelers run game has been an issue all year. It's why they're so bad on first down, and I do think it puts the pass game in a very disadvantageous situation.
Yeah. There you go. There you go.
Yay, word of the day.
Sound it out.
Advantageous.
By the way, in case we see some wrinkles, right? Justin Fields, he hasn't played since week 15, that abdominal
Yeah,
injury,
they have to find a way to be
good to go.
They have to find a way to be better on first down. Have to.
That's it. Much more on this game coming up. We're going to go to the other side. Meanwhile, the playoffs kick off in Houston. The Chargers are going to visit the Texans tomorrow afternoon. Quarterbacks Justin Herbert and C.J. Stroud perform very differently when they face better competition this season. So against teams that finish with a winning record, Justin Herbert threw for 10 touchdowns, only 2 interceptions, fourth best ratio in the NFL. But what about C.J. Stroud? Really struggling against better competition, throwing 3 more interceptions than touchdown, finishing with a 40 QBR, each of those ranking bottom 5 in the NFL. So, Dan the man, how do you anticipate that this Chargers defense is going to make life difficult for the second-year quarterback?
They'll lie to everybody on the offense. They'll show you one thing, and then it's really another thing. And so often we talk about it as, you know, it only impacts the pass game. I think one thing that this defense in LA does with Jesse Minter is there's late rotation. So a lot of times you get to line of scrimmage as an offense and you think, oh, I can run the football because there's going to be 2 safeties, or I could run to a weakness. And then all of a sudden that rotation happens late and we're down a body as an offense. And I'm like, dang, we missed that one. I think the second thing is they're really good at understanding or predicting when you are going to run the football, and they get into their run blitzes where people are slanting or moving at angles and they create advantage for themselves. And RC knows this. Their disguises are absolutely diabolical. And so if you are in those obvious passing situations, you're so often as a quarterback and as an offense just guessing of who's coming from where, what's the coverage, and where's the vacancy. And that is a huge opportunity for this defense, and it stinks for an offense that doesn't protect well.
And that's what's extremely scary if you're C.J. Stroud, D'Amico Ryans, Bobby Slowick, is that you've had trouble with these teams that can bring pressure but also disguise their looks, man. I think back to watching Green Bay early on this season and how effective those tackle stunts are, or adding a backer to a 4-man rush. And this truly started a little bit against the Baltimore Ravens in the playoffs last year. And so some sort of way, you're going to have to get the football out of C.J. Stroud's hands early, those quick screens, opportunities for Joe Mixon in the pass game, because if you can't do that, if you get behind the sticks with Mentor's defense, the defense coordinator of the Los Angeles Chargers, you're in trouble. And the way that they use Derwin James as sort of that chess piece in those disguises and in those rushes is going to be huge for C.J. Stroud to navigate and pick up pre-snap.
Mina, let's go to the other side. What do you expect Greg Roman's game plan to look like for Herbert and company?
Well, first of all, I do think Herbert can and will push the ball downfield the way he has this season to Ladd McConkey. But I also wouldn't be surprised if Greg Roman leans a little bit on what his old team, Baltimore, did against the Texans and goes particularly with regards to the ground game. So the Texans have an excellent run defense, but I thought Baltimore did a really good job of taking advantage of their aggression on the defensive line with some of those trap and wham runs that I think we'll also see from Roman. And then what you see here, Herbert as a runner. So Lamar ran for over 100 yards, right, on Houston. And you can look at that and say, well, that's Lamar Jackson. But the Texans have statistically been one of the worst defenses in the NFL against rushing quarterbacks all year long, allowing the most yards per carry of any defense. Meanwhile, Justin Herbert this year has the most carries of his entire career. So don't be surprised if we see some designed runs for Justin Herbert baked into this game plan, because it's been something that Houston has struggled to defend.
Yeah, meanwhile, Herbert, he only has 3 picks all season. How about that? Very, very impressive.
Playing awesome.
Yep. All right, we have 6 picks across the show today. Let's see who we got. Ooh, RC is on the Texans. I feel bad that I'm not. It's the first time I'm picking against him.
Hometown.
But RC, what do you know that we don't?
I actually don't know anything. Like, this is purely a guess. This is off of emotion, and it's not one of those like Marcus things where I just didn't want to pick a score and I was being a contrarian the entire show. You know, I feel like at some point a team has to dig deep. At some point a team has to have some understanding that you got to be a dog and step up, make plays, protect your quarterback. And defensively, a guy like Derek Stingley has to show us why he's one of the best ball guys in all of football, along with Kalen Bullock.
And you are on your home field. It's been somewhat of a disappointing season, so we will see. All right, some top stories to get to now, and we start with the NFL making the decision to move Monday's Vikings-Rams game out of SoFi Stadium as a result of the devastating wildfires still raging in Southern California. That game will now be played on Monday night in Glendale, Arizona at State Farm Stadium, host of the Cardinals. The league saying that this decision was made in consultation with public officials, the teams, and the NFLPA. Meanwhile, the Lions are on a bye week, and their two coordinators are very busy. 4 interviews for OC Ben Johnson in the next 48 hours with the Patriots, Raiders, Bears, and Jags. Meanwhile, DC Aaron Glenn, he has 5 interviews this week. Jets, Saints, Raiders, Jags, Bears, and all the while, both is their first ever Super Bowl run. And some very bad news out of Cleveland this week. Deshaun Watson has injured and re-injured his Achilles. He underwent a second surgery on Thursday, and according to Adam Schefter, now this puts his 2025 season in jeopardy. So, Dan, Cleveland now picks second overall in the draft. Do they have to take a quarterback in your estimation?
No, they don't have to in the draft, but I do know this. There's $63 million in the red for next year's cap. So you're not replacing the quarterback position with something expensive. You have to find it in a cheap manner. The only 2 assets that are worth a lot that the Cleveland Browns have are the number 2 pick and Myles Garrett. And I entertain the idea, and I think they will at some point have to entertain calling the Minnesota Vikings, maybe if they don't like somebody in the draft, and saying, are you willing to part with J.J. McCarthy because he's cheap? It depends on if they liked him coming out of college last year, and having a conversation around Myles Garrett and or that number 2 draft pick.
Wow, there's a whole lot of there. Very interesting, and we have a while to talk about it. But
it's the situation they're in.
What a situation. Only 19 games. Hurts has not played because of being under concussion protocol since December 22nd. Meanwhile, slow start's a real issue for the Eagles this season. Here's Jalen Hurts addressing the media just moments ago.
Because that's the main thing, the team we're about to play. Obviously, we've gone through 3 weeks of coach coming up here and saying he's still in protocol, and now he's saying that he's not in protocol anymore. So I don't think there's anything else to talk about with that. It'll be a great challenge. We got to go out there and compete and play good ball.
Pretty straightforward there, and Hurts has had a terrific season overall. He has won 5 straight games. He has thrown for 9 touchdowns compared to 1 interception, best ratio in the NFL during that time. He also ranks 3rd in completion percentage and 6th in total QBR. He's played 2 home playoff games in his career. The Eagles coasted to wins in those, winning by at least 20 points in each, for whatever that's worth, but it does give him confidence. So, RC, lots of talk about Hurts and Jordan Love, obviously, in this one, but you think it's a different part of the offense that could determine this game. What is it?
Yeah, I think for both of these teams, the run game is extremely important. For as much as we've praised Saquon Barkley and all of that praise has been warranted, Josh Jacobs has been a huge part of what Green Bay has been able to do offensively as well. And when you look at the games where this offense truly started to click, it was because Josh Jacobs got going early and they could get into some of that play action motion game that we see from Matt LaFleur. And so on both sides of the football, you think about Saquon Barkley, his impact on what Jalen Hurts can do and also keeping him healthy. Josh Jacobs and what they can do in the pass game if you're the Green Bay Packers, especially without Christian Watson, is extremely important.
Yeah, I agree completely, Ryan. I think about that Eagles defense, which plays with the most light boxes, by the way, in all of football. And this Packers rushing attack, which we've said all year has been one of the most underrated ground games in the NFL. I think that's the key matchup. And I think it's the key matchup early on. Because if Green Bay falls behind to Philadelphia, if they're not able to run the ball well early in the first quarter of this game, that's when I get worried about this offense. And I say that, aligned for the fact that Jordan Love has thrown them back into games. But for me, it's actually less about the Eagles' defense and the pass rush teeing off and more about what's going on the other side of the ball. If you fall behind against this Philadelphia team, they will take over the game. They will control it. You won't see the ball. Right? You're not going to get the ball back. So I think it's just so important for Green Bay from a game script perspective to run the ball well early.
Let me touch on that. The way this game starts, I think this game will be decided what happens in the first quarter. I completely agree with you, MK. 2 reasons why. Jalen coming off of a time when he hasn't played in a while. He's got the worst QBR in the NFL when it comes to the first and second drives of a football game. So the best way, rusty quarterback or a guy who hasn't played in a long time, if you're Green Bay, you pounce on him. You hope that a slow start happens. I think the second thing is this. Philadelphia in the first quarter this year is minus 35 in points. They're plus 157 quarters 2, 3, and 4.
Right.
So Green Bay's got to know
That's
it's coming. To Mina's point, like, you got to find a way to try to minimize the run game. I do think for Green Bay's offense, trying to handle the speed, quickness, and athleticism of Carter and Bond will be huge. You're not going to get an extra body down near the line of scrimmage often from Philly. You got to handle the quickness at the defensive tackle position, and then Zach Bond's ability to just dip under blocks or avoid blocks. Body on body has got to be the kind of calling card for the Packers run game.
You know, and Dan, to your point about those first quarters, Philly scoreless in no less than 10 first quarters this season. So they got to hope that there's not a lot of rust.
It hasn't been as bad recently, but it was a thing this year, for sure.
Yeah, it was. All right. And we, by the way, are all on Philly. Oh, what does that say? Oh, yep, there's the gong.
And honestly, like, this is a game, guys, that Green Bay is a team at points this year that looked like a true Super Bowl contender.
Totally agree.
Even though I know we are all on Philly, we understand the type of threat that the Green Bay Packers are.
Yeah, they could be threatened by the Packers, or they could go to the Super Bowl and win it all, right? That's where we are today. On Sunday, and Josh Allen, this guy owns the wild card round. He is 1 win away from tying Joe Flacco and Brett Favre for the most wild card wins, and 3 passing touchdowns shy of tying Ben Roethlisberger for the most in the wild card round. He's also averaging over 350 passing and rushing yards combined per game. Dan, what problems does Allen and that Bills offense present for Denver this weekend?
Well, we've talked about it a ton on this show, is the 4-by-1 formation, where Buffalo will consistently get into 4-by-1, and they'll do it a bunch of different ways, Hannah, meaning they'll take 1, 2, 3, 4 people, put them on one side of the line of scrimmage, and they'll put one guy backside. And defenses struggle because you don't want to create a ton of one-on-ones for a corner, and then so you'll take a safety and shade that way just to make sure you have an extra body. And so Buffalo constantly is trying to create advantages, whether it's front side, and you could have these guys be blockers on the front side, and then you can run the ball weak, and all of a sudden you have a great numbers advantage. So Buffalo's very good at getting to it a ton of different ways. One-on-one routes, an RPO or a flat route to the front side of the play, or a run weak side. Now, this is why Denver, I think, is uniquely built to handle that. Kansas City last week gets into a little bit of a 3-by-1 to start, but immediately after the snap, because the back goes that way, it creates another 4-by-1. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now, this is where I believe Denver is uniquely built to handle it. The Defensive Player of the Year candidate, Patrick Surtain, what they do is they're going to take him and say, that single receiver, no matter who it is, you take him. And so often when you get into these formations as an offense, you're trying to create a one-on-one that's really good for you, or outnumber somebody front side. Now, here's what happens when Patrick can handle it by himself. Number one, see the safety. He could be a run-fill guy for the weak side run because he doesn't have to worry about a deep threat. Patrick Surtain, you have that single receiver everywhere you go. And if he doesn't, or if it's not a weak side run, then what happens is they kick everything to the front side. Now, as Surtain tracks this guy, again, he's by himself, I look at it and say, well, Kansas City still has 1, 2, 3, 4 guys front side. That's still their 4-by-1. But because of Patrick Surtain, Denver has 1, 2, 3, 4 guys front side. So the outnumbering of the scheme of this is no longer prevalent. Look at the coverage that you get because you could push all these numbers to the field. There's nowhere for an offense to take advantage of it anymore. Surtain's completely by himself, and then you could still rush the passer. I believe this is a massive advantage for Denver, strictly because you could treat him like a Darrelle Revis type of player. You could put him by himself, and you're no longer weak where so many defenses are versus that 4-by-1 where Buffalo goes to it 8 to 10 times a game.
Right. He just affects so many other things in the game.
It's like playing with 12.
Yeah, I'm glad you called him out as a Defensive Player of the Year candidate. Absolutely.
Totally.
So, Mina, let's say this plays out the way that Dan laid it out. Let's say he takes away those top targets. Where should Josh Allen look?
Well, that's the beauty of the Bills' offense. They don't have a number one wide receiver who Patrick Surtain can take out. Dan makes a great point about the 4-by-1, their ability to defend it. But I actually think the Bills have something going for them in this one, which is the Denver defense, fantastic this year. Vulnerability, however, in the pass defense at the linebacker position. They are second worst in the NFL in DVOA on targets to running backs. What do the Bills have? One of the best pass-catching running backs in the entire NFL in James Cook. And this offense, I would argue, in general, under Joe Brady, is fantastic at attacking the linebacker position generally. There's a reason why on short throws, they average the most yards after catch per reception in the NFL. They're tied with Baltimore in that regard. So in my mind, this doesn't need to be a game where Josh Allen has to push the ball downfield very often, because James Cook, I think, is actually their best matchup opportunity.
Meanwhile, on the other side, RC, we got two rookie quarterbacks here, by the way, playing this weekend with Jane Daniels and Bo Nix. So how do you expect Sean Payton to use Nix in this one?
Yeah, see, I think that's what's important. And I don't necessarily know how he's going to use him. I mean, that's the beautiful part about watching these games be played. But I think you want to try to stretch the field as much as possible. And when they are aggressive with Bo Nix, we've seen him have some success. But I think what happens with this team is sometimes when he has some of those turnovers, we watch him pull back on Bo Nix. And we saw the way that they can use someone like Mims in the screen game and allow those to create big plays. But when we watch this team sort of make that progression in the middle of the season with Bo Nix, it was because they would threaten the deep part of the field and back some of these teams up off of Bo Nix and the line of scrimmage. Now, they're going to get a ton of too high safety from the Buffalo Bills. So choosing those opportunities is going to be paramount. But we've watched Bo Nix work too high safeties or two safety defenses in the middle of the field by pressing it through the seam. And we need to see some of that for the Buffalo Bills to give them opportunities for chunk plays.
Yeah, I agree. I think it'll be really interesting to see how Buffalo defensively tries to rush Bo Nix. You have to treat him as one of those keep him in the pocket type of quarterbacks. And one thing that he has done this year that has hurt him is he will often leave clean pockets and run backwards and try to get out to his right. I think defensively you can bait him into doing that at times and run himself into a sack.
I suspect something Peyton does, Sean Payton in this game, is he puts him on the move a lot.
Yeah.
And that's something we've seen all year long, right? But some of this has to do with the matchup too, because the Bills defense is very fundamentally sound. Actually, the worst in the NFL in success rate versus quarterbacks on designed rollouts and designed scrambles throwing football. So for Sean Payton,
so aggressive towards some of those play action or runs, and the boot is consistently there.
It'll be so interesting to see how he handles it in that atmosphere, his playoff debut on the road, and he's been very impressive this season. I can't wait to see it. All right, time for an ESPN Bet Sportsbook same-game parlay. And for that, we go back to Mina. Mina, over under 7.5 rushing attempts for Josh Allen in this one. What do you say?
I'm going over here. Josh Allen, big games. I usually bet the over, or for the over on him carrying the football, but I think against the Broncos defense that plays a ton of man coverage, he will have a ton of scrambles in this one.
All right, let's go back to the rookie. Over under 224.5 passing yards for Nix.
Yeah, I'm going over. He's been topping this pretty consistently over the last second part of the season or so. And while I don't think a lot of it maybe will come through air yards, I do think Sean Payton's going to find a way to get his pass catchers yards after the catch against this Bills defense that plays quite soft.
And give us a player who you think's going to find their way into the end zone.
It's James Cook, whether it's as a pass catcher or on the ground. He, to me, is the most reliable red zone target for Buffalo in this one, and I suspect he will score.
All right, Buffalo currently a 9-point favorite over Denver at ESPN Bet.
All customers can get rewarded with a $5 bonus bet when you make a deposit of $25 or more at ESPN Bet Sportsbook. Head over to the app and use code HUDDLE to get started today.
And let's check out our game picks on this one. Everybody's on the Bills. Raise your hand, though, if you think there's a possibility for an upset. Okay. There we go.
I think this defense is...
Not only because they got to play the game.
I think this defense is built to handle. Josh is going to have to make some plays with his legs. This defense is a good defense, man.
Absolutely. All right, coming up, Jaden Daniels to NFL Live. Monday night's final wildcard game between the Vikings and the Rams will now take place at a neutral site as we just continue to look at these horrific pictures. The game is moving to Glendale, Arizona in the wake of the wildfires, which continue to rage in Southern California, and the decision made in the interest of public safety. So this game will be played at the home of the Arizona Cardinals in State Farm Stadium. And Mina, you live there in Los Angeles. The devastation has just been unimaginable. We're not on the same page last week. Take a listen.
It happens. I mean, everyone, it's not perfect. And, there are going to be some times where we have that adversity and we hit those times where, things aren't clicking all the way. And it's just all about just bouncing back. And the great thing about, last week, it wasn't a playoff game. We wasn't in that type of situation where we had to win. So it's just all about just clearing his mind from last week. Just going back to what he has been doing for us for the whole entire season, which was being himself. So that's all we ask for, and for him to clear his mind, be confident, and just go out there and play.
Well said by Justin Jefferson there. It's Friday. Time to dive in on the locks and keys, where we break down the wildcard weekend action with something we guarantee. That's a lock, and then an X factor for the outcome. That is a key. So, RC, starting with you, give us a lock, something you know is going to be true about this game on Monday.
That Brian Flores and the Minnesota Vikings will pay a ton of attention to Puka Nacua. When you go back to that first game that they played, they didn't know that Puka Nacua would probably play as many snaps as he did. Ended up with over 100 yards, and he found ways to get open and also catch the football, be physical after the catch. And Sean McVay moved him around so much, and we were reminded how much of a priority he is for this offense. So I expect that he will be recognized each and every play this week by Flores and his defense.
100%. All right, Dan, give us a key in this one.
The offenses each need to know where the other star defensive lineman is. If I'm Minnesota, I got to know where Jared Verse is at all times. Who's blocking him? How are we blocking him? And if you're the Los Angeles Rams, where's Alex Van Ginkel? Am I throwing screens to him? Do I want to run his way? Each offense on a play-by-play basis needs to know where the other elite defensive lineman is, because in many ways it's the starting point for that defense. I don't want to block either of them one-on-one. I don't want to run towards them either. And I also don't want to throw a ton of screens towards Alex Van Ginkel. That's key for each offense.
Mina, who do you have winning?
I have the Vikings. Ryan hit on something which I think they were taken by surprise about Puka Nacua playing and being so active. But I also think a big factor in the last game was they lost Christian Darrisaw halfway through the game. And before that, they were moving the ball at will on offense. So I think they'll be better prepared now with Cam Robinson at left tackle, although I do think it's going to be high scoring and close.
Yeah, and let's not forget now, it's a neutral site game, too. Okay, of course, you can watch this game, right here. It's going to be Monday night, 8 Eastern on ESPN. Sam Darnold and the Vikings head-to-head with Matthew Stafford and the Rams from Glendale, Arizona. Coverage starts at 6 Eastern with Monday Night Countdown. You can see RC there. All right, let's go to Tampa, where the Bucs will host Jaden Daniels and the Commanders on Sunday night. So, Mina, give us a lock for this one.
Tampa Bay Buccaneers are going to pound the rock. This has been one of my favorite stories of the entire season, that offense's evolution as a run game, going from being more of a zone running team to more of a gap one. And that's also something that this Washington defense has struggled to stop all year long. It'll be a way for them to control the football, keep it out of Jaden Daniels' hands. Wouldn't be surprised if we see a lot of Bucky Irving in this one.
Oh, yeah, he's been so great. RC, what will be the key here?
I think a key is going to be Jaden Daniels handling the pressure packages of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Listen, we know how much Todd Bowles loves to dial up the pressure, but Jaden Daniels is actually good when facing it. And so who wins that matchup is going to tell the tale of how well the Commanders' offense operates throughout this game. And the one thing I can't do, or we can't do, is go back to week one and think that the Washington Commanders are that same offense, or that their quarterback is that same human.
Makes a lot of sense. Stan Man, who do you have winning this one?
I got the Commanders going on the road and getting it done. I also agree that this is going to be, I think, a high-scoring game. I just think the offense in Washington, the way that Jaden Daniels is playing versus a defense that's not great, is going to handle. Ooh, Hannah. You're going Tampa, huh?
It can't be high scoring if it's 20-17, Dan. You can't say it's high scoring and pick 20-17 again.
You can't do that.
That's high scoring.
That's actually oxymoronic.
I've picked 20-17 all season long. Do you know why I do that? Because then you don't offend other fan bases. They're like, oh, you didn't pick. I only picked you guys to lose by 3.
Dan, you're worried about not offending people?
He's as bad as Marcus, Ryan.
He's as bad as Marcus. I only picked you to lose by 3.
That's actually worse. At least Marcus told us by a little, by a lot. I'm not watching.
How was it
I didn't watch the film. Like, it was a lot of things that went into Marcus's reasons for doing things.
You think there was a lot of things that went into it?
You know what I love? I love the fact that Marcus isn't even here, and we have been giving him a hard time.
Marcus didn't even give an answer. They made it up in the room.
Swagoo, I hope you're watching.
I don't know. Just throw something out there for him.
All right. It is no secret that Lamar Jackson has struggled in his playoff career. He has gone 2-4. He has thrown just as many interceptions as touchdowns. But what about the Steelers defense? They really haven't been able to slow down anyone in the playoffs recently. Certainly not like it was back in the day with RC. In 3 games since 2018, they've allowed 12 passing touchdowns to just 1 pick and an average of over 40 points a game, which, gosh, RC, that must hurt to just see that. You did this twice during your career. You played the Baltimore Ravens for a 3rd time in the playoffs. What is that like, and does that give either team an advantage?
I think, one, it calms both teams in preparation. And, Dan knows this from playing teams that are within your division. There's so much that you're familiar with about this team. You're not pressing to learn new things. You're combing through the film to figure out what new wrinkles you could put in. But at this point, you're a finished product. You sort of are who you are. And so both of these teams are coming in understanding who their opponent is, understanding how to attack them and how they'll be attacked. But the thing that I want to talk about the most is what you learn from an emotional and a mental standpoint when you play against these teams. You know who you can break down. You know who's going to bring it every single play. You know who you could play mind games with. And I think those are going to be sort of the battles within the battles that matter. And when you go back to the last meeting of these teams, I thought the physicality in which Derrick Henry ran with is very important, because he was the one player in this rivalry that made it feel like old school Pittsburgh Steelers, old school Baltimore Ravens. He made it feel like he imposed his will on the Pittsburgh Steelers. And in my time in playing in the AFC North, that was normally the team that was victorious on the scoreboard.
Yeah, I'm having flashbacks of like Jerome Bettis and all those running games back in the day. But here's the thing that's going to be very different this time around. Zay Flowers is out of this game, Dan. What do you think that means for the Ravens' game plan tomorrow? What do you expect?
Yeah, I fully expect Isaiah likely to be a almost by snap basis starter. And I think that matchup is very interesting for Pittsburgh defensively.
Yes.
The multiple tight ends that Baltimore can put on the field. I mean, if you look at it, they do it a lot, and they're great at it. Yards per rush, best in the NFL as an offense. Right side of that graphic. Yards per play, they're top 5 in yards or per attempt when they're coming to throw the football. And it's an area where Pittsburgh defensively has absolutely struggled. And so naturally I would think like, oh my gosh, Zay Flowers not in there, number 1 receiver. Huge deal. I don't want to minimize his impact. But I do think that Baltimore can just pivot to putting not only 1 or 2, but 3 tight ends on the field. And Pittsburgh obviously very much so struggles. It's a huge strength for Baltimore.
Yeah, one thing that concerns me about Zay Flowers being out is the Steelers defense is vulnerable to quick game. We've seen this all year long. Throws 2.5 seconds or less, their numbers drop precipitously. You can RPO them. We've, again, that not just Baltimore, other teams as well.
Spread them out.
Zay Flowers, overwhelmingly the Ravens' biggest producer on those quick throws. But you know who's number 2? It's Isaiah Likely. It's not a receiver, which it would surprise some people. But when you think about some of those RPOs, some of those quick hitters over the middle field, you think about the fact that he can get vertical quickly for a tight end. Dan, I can be completely in agreement with you that the Ravens' second tight end might end up being surprisingly important in this game.
All right, we have something new here on NFL Live. We're about to pick this game, but apparently our friend Swagoo is watching. Not liking the comments today. He tweeted.
This freaking guy.
I see y'all haters. I'm
A
always
lot to
watching.
Bro, you have to be on the show.
Wait. He says the Rams Vikings score a lot to a lot. I mean,
Like a lot,
That's
little
what
bit
it
more?
is.
One of them? Is he saying it's going to be a tie?
A lot.
a lot.
Who's going to win, though?
He picked a tie.
He doesn't even pick a winner.
He doesn't pick a winner. He doesn't actually
Is
pick
two a
someone who
lot
actually
a
winning. He said a
winner?
lot to a lot.
Well, that's a lot
And
of
shouldn't
BS,
shouldn't the hyphen be the 2?
Yes.
Like, that means we know we're going to the
Lot
other
to
team?
2.
Marcus, man.
That's so lame. Okay, looking at our picks, we are all on the Ravens, and we actually picked numbers, ladies and gentlemen. Yes, we
Not like
did.
Marcus. 2017, man.
Look at Dan.
2017
With
works
the
every
question
time,
mark is
doesn't
the
it?
best part.
Where's my 2017?
Okay, listen, we have time for one more thing before.
Sao rất là đẹp, có những cái phần họa tiết nhọn nhọn như này. Đấy thì mọi người cột tóc rất là xinh nha. Thì đây là cách mình gợi ý mọi người làm một chiếc thun cột tóc đơn giản từ len. Các bạn tham khảo để làm nhá. Chúc các bạn thành công và hẹn gặp lại ở những video tiếp theo. Bye bye mọi người. Hôm nay mình sẽ hướng dẫn
That's definitely a big elephant.
This is big.
What? The person driving that car is also contemplating. He's like, wait, let me see what that other car does. If he tries to pass, I'll pass. I'll try to pass as well. Let me just wait and see what he does. Nah, not going into the wilderness now. Are you getting good shots? I'm busy here trying to stuff my face.
Let's see. It's on a little.
Ooh, there. This is the closest we've been. And it's actually eating. Okay, let me try to take a picture while we're here.